Hello and welcome to this Blackwell Online podcast. My name is George Miller, and my guest today is science writer and journalist Marek Kohn. Marek's previous books include A Reason for Everything, Natural Selection and the English Imagination, As We Know It, Coming to Terms with an Evolved Mind, and The Race Gallery, The Return of Racial Science. Much of my work, he writes, is about the implications of scientific thinking for ideas about human nature and society. That impulse is very much in evidence in his latest book, Turned Out Nice, How the British Isles Will Change as the World Heats Up. In the book, he is of course concerned how the physical environment in 2100 will differ from that of 2010, but he's also interested in what climate change will do to our attitudes as political beings, citizens, neighbours, individuals. My first question for Marek was, why examine a global problem from a national perspective?
I was set the challenge of looking at climate change on a national scale, or the scale of the British Isles. And when I started to think about it, I realised that it had potential for doing something, for thinking about climate change in ways that are actually rather difficult to do when one's thinking either about the world as a whole or about the places in the world that are going to be worst affected. It's not going to be the end of the world in this country, in these islands. And that actually opens up a bit of space to look at things that are going to be happening or likely to be happening at levels that we don't usually consider. This is not about putting a saucepan of water on the gas and working out what happens as it heats up. This is about thinking about our relationships, thinking about how, well, not really our relations, thinking about how our descendants may relate to each other, may relate to other parts of the world, how they may understand their relationship to their environment and their sense of national identity or other forms of identity. Now, people in other parts of the world will also have their relationships and perceptions of those kinds, their sense of themselves changed by climate change, but where the pressures of climate change are going to be absolutely overwhelming, it's obviously much more important to think about the droughts, think about the floods. Here we have some different issues, and that's been very, very interesting to go into.
But the title of the book nonetheless carries quite an ironic charge.
Yeah, Turned Out Nice is ironic in a number of ways. Part of it is the way we use the phrase. We don't mean very much by it. It's one of those things, it's part of talking about the weather. And of course, all we're really saying when we talk about the weather is I kind of like you, and let's get along, okay. The idea of turning out nice relates to the thing that people always say when you talk about climate change in Britain, which is something along the lines of chance would be a fine thing. And yeah, I mean, I can understand that and as one packs one's bag for 3 seasons for a 2-day excursion, and you don't know what you're going to be faced with when you come home when you go out. Well, yeah, sure. The idea of pleasanter weather is superficially attractive, but it's superficial. The image I have in mind is people saying to each other, yeah, it turned out nice, hasn't it? But actually, they're living in a world, not only a world that's much worse, but actually their own circumstances are much worse. And this is the absolutely crucial thing, is that however you try and reckon it up, if we proceed on the path that we're on at the moment, and our descendants proceed on that path, and gas emissions continue along the kind of track that they're going along at the moment, then come the end of the century, we can expect a world that is very, very tense and fraught and conflicted. I mean, think how volatile the world's markets are these days. Think how important confidence is to the economy. And then think about a world in which every week something shocking is happening in some part of the world. A harvest is failing, there's a flood here, a storm there, a heat wave somewhere else. And that's just the dramatic stuff. People may be in their shirt sleeves, but they aren't going to be very relaxed if they're continually worrying about their jobs, whether their pensions are worth anything anymore, or indeed whether they can find anything in the shops.
All that being so, but at the same time, given our collective tendency to put our hands over our ears when the news gets too bad,
How did you calibrate the tone that you wanted to achieve in this book?
What I wanted to do in this book was not preach to people or actually offer solutions, but to write about climate change, to think about climate change in a way which was different. It seems to me to be very important to try and find new ways, more or less creative ways, of engaging with the problem. I think I was guided most of all by the data, really. What I've tried to do is say, okay, what might the world be like, or what might the British Isles be like if we carry on the way we are and our descendants carry on the way that we've been carrying on? So that's two things. One is emitting carbon in the way that burning carbon in the way that we are at the moment for long enough to cause the damage. And also taking the kinds of attitudes to each other, towards the outside world and to society forward into the future without really reevaluating them. So this was about telling a story and making suggestions. This wasn't about creating a world. I've done a series of cameos of the future, but I've realised very early on when I started writing them that I really didn't want to make a model train set of the future. I didn't want to have a fully realised world. What I wanted was lots and lots of suggestions that people could take in various ways that I hoped would actually be a little bit unsettling, but not without humour. The cover of the book has been designed. I was very pleased that without me prompting them, the design people came up with an ironic and humorous one. My sense of humour does tend towards the somewhat dry, and it's a way of coping with the awareness of grave and ominous news, and I hope that some of that has come through into the book.